The story begins in the dawn of Egypt's civilization. Obelisks first appeared in the Old Kingdom, around the 4th to 5th dynasties, as stone monuments at the solar temples of Heliopolis, also known as ancient Unu, the city of the sun. These early obelisks symbolized petrified rays of the sun, god Ra. In the 5th dynasty, around 2500 BC, kings at Abusir built open-air sun temples, each featuring a central obelisk carved from stone blocks. These were not yet the slender forms we later recognize. Although the practice of solar temples waned after that period, the tradition of erecting obelisks spread through the Middle Kingdom and into the New Kingdom, starting around 1550 BC. By New Kingdom times, Egypt's rulers were commissioning towering single-piece granite monoliths, rivaling the pyramids for ambition and mystery. Egyptians themselves called these monuments tekhenu, but it was the Greeks who gave us the word obelisk, which literally means needle. In temple reliefs and texts, each obelisk was described as a ray of sunlight turned to stone. The very name of Heliopolis, Unu, means city of pillars, underscoring how central obelisks were to early sun worship. Inscriptions show pharaohs dedicating obelisks to the sun god Amun-Ra and to their own glory, ensuring the pharaoh's eternal presence under the daily cycle of sunrises. New Kingdom pharaohs built more obelisks, almost always in pairs, than any earlier rulers, setting the stage for the grandest examples of ancient engineering. How did the Egyptians master the hard granite of Aswan to carve these monoliths? The answer lies in the quarries of Aswan, also known as ancient Elephantine, at the Nile's first cataract. All Egyptian obelisks were carved from a single block of red or pink granite quarried here. Kings Valley tours today still visit the unfinished obelisk in the Aswan quarry, which cracked during Hatshepsut's reign and stands as proof of the techniques used. Archaeologists report that workers began by cutting trenches around the stone and driving wooden wedges into drilled holes. When soaked with water, the wood would swell and split the rock along the planned outline. They also used bronze and copper chisels as well as heavy stone pounders made of dolerite to pound indentations, and abrasive sand to saw through granite. Experimental archaeology has demonstrated these methods by repeatedly hitting granite with a harder stone and mixing sand and water with copper tools. Modern researchers can slowly replicate the carving of Egyptian obelisks. After separating the block from the bedrock, the artisans smoothed and shaped it. They drilled closely spaced holes and then sawed between them with a copper saw and sand slurry, in effect grinding the granite away bit by bit. The result were the polished, vertical faces we see today. Even in the unfinished obelisk's trench, archaeologists have documented tool marks and painted guideline lines where workers stood and chipped away. Once carved, these gigantic pillars had to be moved from the quarry to their temples, sometimes hundreds of miles away. We know the Egyptians placed heavy pillars on wooden sledges. A famous wall painting from 1880 BC in the tomb of Jehuti-Hotep even shows a laborer pouring water on the sand in front of a sledge hauling a colossal statue. Modern physics experiments confirm why wetting sand makes it more firm, reducing the effort needed to pull the sledge. In one experiment, adding just enough water doubled the sand's stiffness, preventing sand from heaping in front of the load. The Egyptians apparently used this trick as shown by that tomb painting and by remnants of water on ancient transport ramps. The famous Aswan obelisks were moved by river. Workers likely dragged them on sledges over sand to specially prepared loading ramps at the Nile. We know from texts and reconstructions that teams of thousands of men were used. Historian Margaret Bunsen describes the scene. Ropes were wrapped around the pillar, then dragged slowly on a massive wooden sledge to the riverbank, using stands and logs to ease the movement. Once at the river, it was loaded into a specially built barge in a dry dock. When ready, the water was let into the dock, and the barge floated free, the pillar safely aboard. In some accounts, up to 9 oared galleys then towed the barge downstream towards the temple city. This elaborate operation, dragging, docking, floating, could be done without any modern machinery, just ropes, wood rollers, ramps, and enormous manpower. Erecting the obelisk to stand vertically was another engineering feat. We know the Egyptians carved a groove into the bedrock of the pedestal to act as a pivot or alignment guide. One leading explanation from Egyptologist Reginald Engelbach is that the Egyptians built an earthen ramp or embankment at the base of the pedestal. The obelisk would be levered up slowly. As the edge lifted into the groove on the pedestal, earth was added under the other end each time, bringing it to a steep angle. When at the right angle, workers would pull the top end down into place. Another version is that the obelisk was dragged or winched up a long sloping ramp until its center of gravity was past the pivot point on the pedestal. Then the earth beneath the top portion was carefully removed, often through a sand-filled funnel. So the obelisk gently settled into the groove. The groove ensured the base did not slip sideways. In 1999, Novia's Secrets of Lost Empires actually tested a similar idea. They built a sand ramp and gradually emptied out sand from under the stone, letting one edge of the obelisk drop into the groove, then pulled it upright with ropes. This demonstration worked to get a smaller obelisk standing, suggesting a plausible ancient technique. A 1976 study on ancient lifting techniques quotes Pliny on Ramses's obelisks and proposes a sand funnel method. In one recreation at Karnak, ropes were pulled in stages as an edge pivoted on the prepared pedestal. Ingenious ramps with sandbanks and stone counterweights likely did the heavy work. Notably, Egyptologist Mark Lehner reminds us that ancient obelisks were monolithic, carved and set as a single piece, which is why no evidence exists for stacking construction. The grandest obelisks once adorned Egypt's great temples. In Thebes, which is modern Luxor, the temple complexes of Karnak and Luxor boast the most famous examples. At Karnak, 2 colossal obelisks originally stood at the temple entrance. One of them, commissioned by Queen Hatshepsut, survives as the world's tallest remaining ancient obelisk, standing about 29 meters high. The grandest obelisks once adorned Egypt's great temples. In Thebes, now known as Luxor, the temple complexes of Karnak and Luxor boast the most famous examples. At Karnak, 2 colossal obelisks originally stood at the temple entrance. One of them, commissioned by Queen Hatshepsut, survives as the world's tallest remaining ancient obelisk, standing about 29 meters high. The hieroglyphs on its faces glorify Amun-Ra and Hatshepsut. The other, ordered by Thutmose I, fell in antiquity and now lies broken. Elsewhere at Luxor Temple, Pharaoh Rameses II added another pair of obelisks around 1250 BC in front of the pylon. These were each around 23 meters tall, carved from Aswan granite and shipped up the Nile on barges. The Western obelisk remains in Luxor today. Its twin was presented to France in 1830 and now stands in Paris's Place de la Concorde. Inscriptions on the Luxor pair celebrate Rameses II and the god Amun. These examples show the epitome of pharaonic obelisk art. Precise vertical faces, sunken relief hieroglyphs, and gleaming polished tops often capped with gold. Heliopolis, or Yunu, the spiritual birthplace of the obelisk, once held many such monuments to the sun god Re, though none survive at the site today. The southern tip of the Temple of the Sun had twin obelisks in ancient times. In fact, Heliopolis was nicknamed the City of a Million Columns. All that remains of those obelisks are a few fragments and those that were transported away. The Lateran obelisk in Rome and some fragments in museums. These great obelisks stand today not only in Egypt but around the world, in Rome, Istanbul, London and New York, as testaments to their origin. Yet inside they all share the same core of Egyptian craftsmanship. One of the greatest archaeological clues to obelisk construction is the unfinished obelisk in Aswan. Unfinished obelisk quarry, Aswan. In this open-air site, the largest known Egyptian obelisk was begun but never raised. It measures about 42 meters or 137 feet and would have weighed around 1,200 tons, nearly a third larger than any obelisk ever erected. Legend says Queen Hatshepsut commissioned it for Karnak, but as workers carved it from the bedrock, a crack appeared. They abandoned it on the spot. Today we see the colossal granite pillar still lying in situ, only one-third detached from the living rock. Alongside it are clearly visible the zigzag channels and step-like marks where stone cutters chiseled away the granite. Archaeologists have examined this unfinished monolith closely. They report that holes were drilled into the granite about 15 to 20 centimeters deep, then wooden wedges were hammered in. When the wedges were soaked with water, the wood swelled and split the stone. They also find hundreds of stone pounder marks around dislodged dolerite balls the size of footballs, evidence that workers repeatedly struck the granite face. Copper saw cuts and drill holes are present too, and red ochre lines paint where the artisans were working. All this matches what we see on the finished obelisks. The unfinished obelisk is literally an open-air museum of ancient engineering. The mainstream archaeological view is clear. Egyptian pharaohs commissioned and built these monoliths, using the tools and techniques described above. However, the sheer scale and precision of the obelisks have inspired alternative. Some independent researchers argue that such massive pillars are too difficult to carve and raise with only copper tools and manpower, suggesting lost knowledge or earlier civilizations might be responsible. These ideas include everything from Atlantis-style precursor cultures to aliens or collation chemistry, softening stone proposals largely outside the academic consensus. One point of intrigue are the so-called scoop marks in the Aswan quarry. These wide, smooth depressions carved into the granite look unlike the jagged dents made by hand pounding. Fringe author Christopher Dunn speculated that a specialized pivoting cutting machine made these scoops. Others, like Brian Forster, have suggested the use of vibrational or sonic tools to fracture rock. Some even point to legends of a mythical bird or plant that could dissolve stone. None of these hypotheses have any hard evidence in the archaeological record. No physical machine or device has ever been found at the site. The quarry itself contains only the expected chisels, pounders, and unfinished blocks. Professional Egyptologists counter that repeated dolerite pounding over long periods can actually produce surprisingly smooth, curved cuts. And experiments have shown that with time and angle, hammering alone can leave cup-like marks. Whether carved by known pharaohs or imagined ancient engineers, the Egyptian obelisks embody a profound legacy. These monoliths still captivate us with the questions they raise. Did Hatshepsut's craftsmen anticipate that one of their unfinished quarry projects would intrigue people 3,500 years later? Do the precise proportions of Luxor Temple's obelisks reflect only ritual planning or some deeper understanding of geometry? Even if the answer is they did it with muscle, sweat, and copper tools, the audacity of the accomplishment reshapes our view of Egypt's past. It reminds us that prehistoric and Bronze Age societies were far more capable than often assumed. On the other hand, the fact that such complete obelisks exist and we can trace their stories back to named pharaohs anchors them firmly in history. Each block of granite, each hieroglyph is a page of Egyptian record. The obelisk bridge myth and material fact. They were symbols of the sun god, but they also clock in our calendar with names and dates. In the end, the true mystery may not be how they were made, but why their memory endures. In every city square where an Egyptian obelisk still stands, there's a subtle challenge to ponder the ingenuity of the people who raised it. The unfinished obelisk in Aswan, with its clear tool marks, has taught us much about labor and loss. The grand, tall obelisks of Karnak and Luxor have taught us much about devotion and power. And even the replicas in Paris or London remind us how these symbols transcended Egypt. Perhaps most of all, studying the obelisks encourages us to stay curious. How far would you push yourself to move a 300-ton pillar? How patiently would you see a plan through if it meant reshaping religious practice? These questions may not have straightforward answers, but they shape our understanding of an ancient world that was both stranger and more familiar than we sometimes think. Stay curious, stay legendary. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the mysteries of ancient Egypt, please don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and leave a comment with your thoughts or theories. We love hearing from curious minds like you. And for more fascinating explorations into lost civilizations, ancient mysteries, and historical wonders, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss an adventure into the unknown. Stay curious and stay legendary and stay. Stay curious, stay legendary. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the mysteries of ancient Egypt, please don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and leave a comment with your thoughts or theories. We love hearing from curious minds like you. And for more fascinating explorations into lost civilizations, ancient mysteries, and historical wonders, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss an adventure into the unknown. Stay curious and stay legendary and stay.